Welcome to my channel. Before I make any reaction to this video, watch this video together with me. Please, as you watch, do not forget to like, share and subscribe, please.
There's a chapter in your book, I believe it's the longest one, called the Jonestown Death Tape. I probably should not have listened to this in the middle of the night before I was about to go to sleep because it was incredibly disturbing. But I will say that the thing that struck me the most about this is a transcript of a tape recording of Jim Jones addressing his congregation just before and during them taking the Flavor Aid, rather than Kool-Aid. Something that struck me is Jones is not ultra articulate. He is just speaking in half concocted thoughts and sentences and phrases, and there are elements there of him scaring people, like saying that there are armed gunmen that are just 20 minutes away or something like this. But I suppose I had always thought that Jim Jones must have put on this incredible, flawless performance of charisma in order to get people to not just drink Flavor Aid themselves that was poison, but also inject their own children with things like this. But that just wasn't true. He got up there and spoke and rambled, and the whole thing happened anyway.
Right, and he was on quite a lot of speed and other drugs at that point, and I mean, without kind of belittling the gravity of the situation, he sounds a little bit like, Droopy Dog or something like this, right? He can't speak properly because the muscles in his mouth are too relaxed. So I talked about how brainwashing doesn't really mean anything, and high control group is sort of this nebulous term. The word charisma is also a kind of nebulous, meaningless term, and yet sociologists still use it, right? In fact, some of the defenders of brainwashing have said, well, if you people can talk about charisma, why can't I talk about brainwashing? It's actually a fair point. So we're used to thinking of charisma, especially if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, of it's just a score. Some people have a lot of charisma and some people have a little of it, but it works in every situation. And we know from studies of charisma that is not how charisma actually works at all. So Barack Obama, very charismatic president. Donald Trump, very charismatic president. Half the country hates these two people.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not about a high charisma score. It's about a special relationship that a charismatic leader has with their followers. And one thing that happens in so-called cult violence is I think charismatic leaders are very aware of this. They say, if I make one false move, everybody will see I'm just some guy. I'm just some guy yelling about the Bible. I'm not actually a Messiah. I'm not actually a prophet or anything like this. And so certain leaders, and I would put David Koresh and Jim Jones in this category, will do literally anything to maintain their charisma, their charismatic authority, to keep the followers from seeing them as just an ordinary person. And I think the reason that Jonestown happened, that this massacre happened, is 20 members said that they wanted to go home with Leo Ryan's party. Congressman Leo Ryan came out to visit and was killed. 20 people out of 1,000 is not very many. But I think as far as Jim Jones was concerned, he said, well, it's 20 today, it's going to be 100 tomorrow. That's it, I've lost the community. And if I can't have this community, nobody will. So to your comments, I think what happened in Jonestown happened not because Jim Jones had this iron grip of mind control over his followers. It was actually quite the opposite. It was because his grip was very tenuous, and he knew that he could lose it at any moment.
Yeah, I suppose if he could actually control them, their every action, every thought, he could have just kept everybody alive. The fact that he did force people to go through this, a revolutionary suicide, he called it, was a symptom of his lack of control of them.
Right. I mean, even had nothing happened at Jonestown, the community was never sustainable.
Yeah.
They did not have enough able-bodied people to grow enough food to feed 1,000 people. They did not have enough money for this community to last. So it was going to end sometime soon. And the leaders knew this. And the leaders had already discussed, how are we going to end this on our own terms, where this doesn't all feel like a massive defeat. But yes, if he had mind control over his followers, when they said, I'm ready to leave, I want to go home with Leo Ryan, he could have just said, no, you don't want to leave. You like it here,
Right,
right?
right.
You want to stay here. It's because he doesn't have mind control that he can't do stuff like that, and he has to resort to tactics like killing a congressman or making everyone commit revolutionary suicide.
Okay, in your book, The Penguin Book of Cults, which I'll just say the only thing I didn't like about it is that it didn't have penguins in it. There were no penguins. That's the publisher. But in your book, you talk about this thing called mediomania.
Alright, wonderful viewers. Here is our own reaction. The Jonestown tragedy. The Jonestown tragedy is one of the darkest moments in modern history. You and I can also attest to that. It is insane to think that Jim Jones, who was on speed and unable to speak properly, could convince over 900 people to follow him to their death. How? But you know what struck me in this topic? The sheer lack of control he actually had. He wasn't a mad control puppet master like many people assume. He was just a man afraid of losing his grip on his followers. This really speaks volume about human physiology and the power of manipulation. It also shows that the more you try to control people, the more it backfires. This is as simple as it is. It's not that his jaw are widened not to say the truth. This is just the plain of it. Let's still continue from the speakers to still hear them out on this particular video. Please do not forget, anywhere you can use to support me, just to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, please.
The only thing I didn't like about it is that it didn't have penguins in it. There were no penguins. That's the publisher. But in your book, you talk about this thing called mediomania, and this was from the late 19th century, right? Can you kind of take me into that chapter of the book? What's mediomania?
Sure. So for this book, a lot of the sources that we used had to be things that were in the public domain because of the way that Penguin Classics works. But one of the things I want to do is to show that long before this term brainwashing is coined in the 1950s, there was a long history of people medicalizing other people's religious choices and framing them not as a choice, but as some kind of contagion or illness. And so in the 19th century, there was a lot of new religions were emerging in the United States, things like Mormonism, the Church of Latter-day Saints, and spiritualism. Spiritualism was people holding seances and believing that they could talk to the dead. And this was a movement that in the 1800s was very closely tied with women's suffrage and other kind of progressive movements. And women had a lot of power to speak in spiritualist churches because it was believed that women were sort of naturally better mediums and better able to talk to the dead. So I found an article about this by a guy named Dr. Marvin, who was a professor of psychological medicine, and his take on why these women in the 1800s are not staying at home raising children and cooking dinner for their husbands and joining these weird new religions is because their womb has been tilted at a funny angle. And if your womb gets tilted at a funny angle, it could cause you to become interested in socialism. It could cause you to become interested in the Latter-day Saints. And he says, and for many women, this is causing them to become mediums. And he calls this mediomania. So he comes up with this kind of medicalized term for these experiences that women are having. And I think most people, if they read Dr. Marvin's treatise today, would say, well, this is kind of misogynistic dreck. This is not science. This is not medicine. But I would argue that we're still kind of making the same moves today with new cultural trends.
Apologizing deviance goes back a very long way. There's a chapter in your book called the Orleans heresy of, I believe it's 1100 or so. Can you tell me about that story and how like pathologizing or medicalizing deviance plays into that?
Yeah, so this happened in France in 1100. Point Europe was Catholic, and other versions of Christianity were considered heresy. And this was the first case where heretics were actually burnt at the stake for heresy. And this was all recorded in Latin. I actually tapped my colleague Jacob Doss, who's a medievalist, to translate the Latin, so we had an original translation for the book. But these two priests are involved in some deviant form of Christianity. We're not exactly sure what. Possibly they were Cathars or something like this. But they are, basically their group is infiltrated. Someone says that they want to join. And then once he's heard enough, reports them to the king and has them arrested. And they are tortured. And then they give these confessions where they say, well, actually, we're not just a different version of Christianity with different doctrines. We actually have sex with demons, and we give birth to demon babies, and we kill them, and we burn the babies to ashes, and then we're made to eat the ash. And this is where it gets interesting, as they say, if you are fed this ash, you're just a heretic forever. You lose your free will. You can't be a proper Christian. You have to be a heretic. And if you put yourself in their position, it's pretty clear why they're telling a story. They're being tortured, right? Yeah. They're looking for a way out. They're looking for a way of saying, yes, I'm a heretic, but I'm not really responsible for this. And these kinds of stories became fairly common in heresy trials. People saying the heretics have some kind of black magic, some sort of mind control they can use. And that's why there are different religions in Europe. And that's why not all people are Catholic. It's not that anybody would willingly choose a religion other than the Catholic Church. So it's not medicalization, but it's basically the same thing. In this case, it's magic instead of an information disease. But the enemy has some type of magic, some type of mind control, and that's the only reason why anybody would ever disagree with us about these things.
In the documentation of this, isn't there a lot of terminology like the heretics vomited out heresy and they were infected with heresy, rather than describing it in a more realistic way? These people came to think that this heresy was legitimate.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We don't think of 1100 as a century with a lot of medical science, right, or a lot of hygiene, but it is telling that the language that they use, they are still comparing heresy to a disease, and they're using the language of kind of bodily functions of excretion and revulsion and sickening to talk about what is really just a different idea about Jesus, simply a different idea about the nature of Jesus is framed in terms of a plague.
The way that the folks in 1100 talked about this heresy actually does remind me a lot of how the CIA talked about GIs, writing essays in favor of communism. They clearly could never have become anti-capitalists. They had to be infected with some kind of special germ or be manipulated with some kind of very elaborate and ancient dark magic or technique of psychological mind control, brainwashing. Is it kind of the same thing?
Yeah, I think we see a straight line from I joined the wrong religion because I was fed magical demon ashes to this woman became a spiritualist because she was riding a horse or something and her womb got tilted slightly to the left and now she's a spiritualist, to you've been infected with an information disease, or you've been infected with Chinese communist mind control magic, to you got the woke mind virus.
Yeah,
I think it's a straight shot going for thousands of years.
Something I noticed about the book is that there were a lot of instances of things that go back pretty far that are really, really familiar. Like, one thing that you talked about was that early Christians were seen as consorting with kind of evil spirits, doing dark rites, maybe even underground, using the blood of children to do nefarious things, being evil in ways that would creep anybody out. But then you talk about how later Christians themselves accused other Christians of doing all of the same things. And then even later than that, Christians in high church scenarios accused heretics of doing the same thing. And now I see people, whether they're Christian or secular, a lot of them are accusing like LGBT people or Muslims or kind of anybody they don't like of doing a lot of the same things. Like how to speak in the way that we do now about cults. So they're doing evil stuff underground. They're using children's blood. Like, why is this repeating?
Right.
All right, wonderful viewers. I have to pause this video at this juncture to air a bit opinion and a bit reactions. The speaker connects how accusation of evil acts, such as the modern woke mind virus, like the coronavirus or the Chinese stuff, as used to protect the current power structure. Now, my own reaction on this particular stuff. This concept is so important today. We see this tactics being used in modern politics. That is, it's being twisted. The same thing, but it's being twisted. If we label someone as an evil, mind you, if we label someone as an evil, it justifies any action taken against them, right? If once you label it, does it justify that any action taken against such individual is right? Look at how the term woke has been used to delegitimize entire group, used to the entire group by labeling something as evil. You can really rely on people to defend the good. It's an age-old tactic, and we are seeing being used right now to control the narrative and the manipulate the masses. The speaker still go further. The speaker argued that the fear of losing followers and the need for absolute control were major factors in the Jonestown's massacre. My own reaction on this towards what the speaker said. The real kicker here is the idea that freedom of choice was never really allowed. That is number one. It was all about control. But the moment people wanted to leave, Jones knew he was done. That is a real commentary on the dangers of desolate control on any group. We still see this with cult-like movement in politics today, religion, and even online communities today. If you don't follow the prescribed path, you are the enemy. This is as simple as truth. Please, my viewers, I will also welcome you to share your own opinion and your own view at this particular juncture. Let's reason together and reason along.
They're using children's blood. Like, why is this repeating?
Right. So the first incident that we cover in the book goes back to the days of the Roman Republic. And it's about the Bacchanalia, which were followers of Dionysus, the god of wine. And we don't know what the rites of this particular religion actually were, and at some point they certainly probably did involve...
The folks in 1100 talked about this heresy actually does remind me a lot of how the CIA talked about GIs, writing essays in favor of communism. They clearly could never have become anti-capitalists. They had to be infected with some kind of special germ or be manipulated with some kind of very elaborate and ancient dark magic or technique of psychological mind control, brainwashing. Is it kind of the same thing?
Yeah, I think we see a straight line from I joined the wrong religion because I was fed magical demon ashes to this woman became a spiritualist because she was riding a horse or something and her womb got tilted slightly to the left and now she's a spiritualist, to you've been infected with an information disease, or you've been infected with, Chinese communist mind control magic, to you got the woke mind virus.
Yeah.
I think it's a straight shot going for thousands of years.
Something I noticed about the book is that there were a lot of instances of things that go back pretty far that are really, really familiar. Like, one thing that you talked about was that early Christians were seen as consorting with kind of evil spirits, doing dark rites, maybe even underground, using the blood of children to do nefarious things, being evil in ways that would creep anybody out. But then you talk about how later Christians themselves accused other Christians of doing all of the same things. And then even later than that, Christians in high church scenarios accused heretics of doing the same thing. And now I see people, whether they're Christian or secular, a lot of them are accusing like LGBT people or Muslims or kind of anybody they don't like of doing a lot of the same things. Like, how far back does it go to speak in the way that we do now about cults? So they're doing evil stuff underground. They're using children's blood. Like, why is this repeating?
Right. So the first incident that we cover in the book goes back to the days of the Roman Republic. And it's about the Bacchanalia, which were followers of Dionysus, the god of wine. And we don't know what the rites of this particular religion actually were. And at some point, they certainly probably did involve orgies and possibly even, hallucinogens or things like that. But if you look at what the Republic is saying about this group, they're saying they have bizarre sex orgies, they're killing children, they are corrupting the youth, especially the young Roman men who we need to serve in our military. They're being corrupted with the vices and the seductions of this group. And they have these giant underground catacombs full of prisoners that are equal in population to the size of Rome. And
I'm sorry, this just sounds like QAnon.
It sounds exactly like QAnon, right? And this is before the rise of Christianity. And so the Republic at this time was a very democratic organization. There wasn't a lot of centralized power. And they said, we have to give the Senate much more power to sanction religion and to control what kinds of religious rituals and groups and cults are allowed. And we have to go and arrest people who are part of this kind of evil group. So most historians today would say this was a power grab, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever the Bacchanalia was, it wasn't like it was just this hideous revelation as it's described. That they had known about it for a long time. And there's sort of an idea of what could we do to kind of justify this power grab. Let's exaggerate the Bacchanalia. Let's tell people this thing that they already think is kind of weird is way worse than it actually is. And so those tropes that you see there of evil rituals, hurting children, weird sex stuff, right? Those are the same things that we see Romans accusing the Christians about, that we see Christians accusing Jews and heretics and Satanists about, and then the same things that Tom Hanks has been accused of in sort of modern QAnon conspiracy theories. So unfortunately, what this leads me to conclude is that we may be hardwired to tell these kinds of stories, to make up these claims that there's people who walk among us, they seem nice, they seem like everybody else, but actually in secret, and very close to where we are at this moment, they're doing the worst things you could possibly ever imagine.
Yeah.
All right, please, wonderful viewers. At this point, at the junction, I still pause the video once again to plead with you. Don't forget to share. Please subscribe. This only means you can use to support me. Let me also take you back on one of the points that the speaker mentioned about. The speaker mentioned about or suggests rather than focusing on brainwashing, we need to focus on understanding human behavior and societal influence. The speaker suggests that rather than focusing on brainwashing, we need to focus on understanding human behavior and societal influence. My reaction, instead of jumping straight into labels like brainwashing, using that word, brainwashing, we should ask ourselves, why are people vulnerable to these kinds of movements? Why? What makes people to be vulnerable? Have you asked about it? Have you reasoned up to it? Have you taken some thought in it? Is it about that the people, is it about that the person leading them, or about the environment they are in? It's two things. Is it about the person or about the environment that they are in? It is crucial to understand the physiology behind this choice so that we can present this situation in the future rather than simply blaming people for being brainwashed. My humble opinion. That is very simple as that. What do you think, you my wonderful viewers? What do you think? Do you agree that fear and control play bigger roles than we realize in movements like this? Drop your thought in the comment section below. Let's discuss and analyze together. Encourage us by liking, encourage me to like, to comment, and to subscribe, please. If you like this reaction, don't hesitate. Don't forget to like here for more thought provoking content like this. Hit that notification bell, and I will see you in my next video. Also, if there is any corrections, please don't hesitate to drop at the comment section, as I will be the comment section to hear, to tweet, to comment, to share this idea with you. Thank you, my wonderful viewers. Thank you so much for stopping by.